A guy in a foreign car assaulted a medical student and dumped her on a deserted road in the middle of a snowstorm. 10 years later, he ended up on an operating table, and froze in shock. What the surgeon did next was completely unexpected. Hello, dear friends. While you listen to this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from today. And now, our story begins. Madeline woke up to the creaking of old wooden floorboards. Someone was trying to sneak quietly down the hallway. Just a moment ago, she'd been dreaming of something warm and sunny. But now, winter had fully taken over outside. Frost traced lace patterns on the windows, and a thick white blanket covered her hometown of North Hollow, Vermont. Trying not to wake her little sister, she carefully slipped out from under the covers. Scarlett, sprawled across the bed in sleep, made a soft smacking sound with her lips and rolled to the other side. At 9, she still slept with that peacefulness that had long left 19-year-old Madeline. The January morning greeted her with crisp air, filled with the scent of wood smoke and freshly baked pies. The kitchen windows had already defrosted, which meant Mom had been up for a while. Firewood crackled merrily in the stove. The house was unusually quiet, except for the steady ticking of the wall clock. "The girl's awake," came a voice from the stove. "I thought you were going to sleep till noon." Grandma Olivia, wearing a faded cotton apron over a thick sweater, was working her magic over breakfast. Her gray hair, tied under a worn-out headscarf, framed a wrinkled face with eyes that were surprisingly clear for someone in her late 70s. "Morning," Madeline said, kissing her grandmother's warm, herb-scented cheek. "Where is everyone?" "Your folks left before sunrise. Your dad's preparing the physics lab for the inspection, and your mom's running a book club again." "As always, education comes first," Olivia said with a knowing smile. "You take after them." But there was something new in her eyes. "Matters of the heart, maybe?" Madeline turned toward the window, trying to hide her embarrassment. Beyond the frosty glass was a view she'd known since childhood: snow-covered rooftops of neighbors' houses, an old wooden well blackened with age, and distant churches standing like silent witnesses of time. Somehow, all of it felt both deeply familiar and strangely foreign. As if she were looking back at her childhood from afar, already a different person. "Don't be silly," she waved it off. "No romance here, just classes and rotations." But how could she explain Grayson? How her heart skipped a beat whenever he, usually so focused and serious during training, suddenly smiled just at her? How could she explain that this shy paramedic, with his calm voice and skilled hands, had taken up so much space in her thoughts that even here, in her childhood home, she couldn't stop thinking about him? There was no need to stir Grandma's heart with this. And definitely not her parents. Wyatt and Autumn Whitaker, respected teachers, the intellectuals of North Hollow, as people proudly called them, had clear, firm views on how relationships should begin. First, you introduce yourself to the parents, only then do you talk about feelings. Madeline could practically hear her father's voice in her head before he even said the words. Grandma Olivia didn't press her further. With practiced hands, she used the stove hook to pull a cast-iron pot of porridge from the oven, filling the kitchen with a warm, hearty aroma. "Sit down, sweetheart. Eat something. I barely got a look at you last night, you got in so late and looked exhausted. And now I see you've gotten so thin. Just those big eyes left on that face of yours." She looked at Madeline with quiet affection, noting how much her girl had changed in just 6 months of college. She'd grown, not just taller, but deeper. Her eyes now carried the seriousness of someone older. After breakfast, Madeline helped clean up the kitchen, then offered to light the stove in Olivia's little room. Ever since her parents had returned to the village as teachers after graduating from college, Olivia had lived with them. Her room, small and cozy, was at the far end of the house. The moment Madeline stepped inside, it was like entering another era. Everything felt steeped in history: the darkened icons in the red corner, a hand-painted chest with intricate patterns, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. On the wall, old photographs in frames, her great-grandfather in a military shirt, a young Olivia holding a baby, and stern, unfamiliar faces of relatives she'd never met. "Do you like it in here?" Olivia entered quietly, holding an old wooden jewelry box. "I've always liked it here," Madeline replied honestly. "It's like time stands still." "Time doesn't stand still, child. It just settles in layers, like the rings of a tree. And a person, they carry all those rings inside them their whole life." The old woman sat down on the bed and patted the space next to her, inviting her great-granddaughter to join. "Come here, I want to show you something." From the box, she pulled out a yellowed sheet of paper. "This is the letter telling me your grandfather had died," Olivia said quietly, carefully unfolding the fragile paper. "But I knew 3 days before it came. I felt it in my heart, he was already gone." Madeline gently ran her fingers over the rough paper. The words, "fallen with honor," had faded, but were still clearly readable. "I was a field nurse at the front back then. When the telegram came, I returned to North Hollow, to help my mother and keep the household running. And I never left." Olivia set the telegram aside and gently took Madeline's hands in hers, knotted with age, but still surprisingly warm. "The women in our family are different," she said softly, studying her great-granddaughter's face. "My gift awakened when the telegram came about my husband, back in 1917. Before that, I felt many things, but I didn't trust myself." "Gift?" Madeline repeated. She loved her grandmother dearly, but sometimes Olivia said things that the rest of the family chalked up to her age. "The gift to sense what's coming. To feel joy or danger before it happens. Not every woman in the family gets it. Your mother doesn't have it, but you do." Madeline gave her a gentle smile. Grandma had always believed in signs. She collected herbs, whispered over water when someone in the house got sick. In a family of serious teachers, her rituals were met with amused tolerance. But no one ever objected, she was far too respected and loved. "You don't believe me," Olivia said, not as a question, but as a statement. "And that's fine. Belief doesn't come from words, it comes from experience. But remember what I'm telling you. In our family, the gift comes after something big, something that shakes you to your core. It's like something breaks inside, and then mends differently. You'll feel it. When the time comes." She reached back into the box and pulled out an old, worn book bound in leather. "A herbal. It came from my mother. She got it from hers. It's older than anyone in this house. It's not just about herbs, it holds women's wisdom, passed down through generations. One day, it'll be yours." Madeline took the book carefully. It smelled earthy and old, like herbs, wax, and time itself. "Thank you, Grandma," she said, holding the book to her chest, unexpectedly moved. "I promise I'll read it." "You will," Olivia smiled, slipping the herbal back into the box. "When the time's right. For now, tell me, how's life treating you in the city?" The conversation drifted elsewhere. Madeline spoke of life in the dorms, of hospital rotations, and the brutal winter. It was well past noon when Scarlett peeked into the room, still tousled from sleep but glowing with excitement. "Madeline," she said, "you promised we'd go for a walk." "Go on," Olivia smiled. "Youth won't wait." Madeline spent the whole day with her sister, sledding, building a snowman, then wandering through the snowy village until their cheeks turned red from the cold. Back home, dinner was waiting, along with their parents, who had just come back from school, tired, but clearly proud of the work they'd done. The evening passed slowly, filled with warm conversation about school, village news, and summer plans. Later that night, as Madeline was braiding her hair for bed, her mother came into the room. She was still beautiful, with the same chestnut braid as Madeline, though now streaked with silver. "How's everything going?" Autumn asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Made it through anatomy." Madeline smiled. "Everything's fine, Mom. The hospital practice is interesting. The professors are strict, but fair. Her mother nodded, pleased. You understand how important it is to have a profession, right? Especially now, when the world's so uncertain. Medicine is solid. It's reliable. Yes, Mom, Madeline said, trying to hide a sigh. How many times had she heard those words? Without an education, you're nowhere. An educated person must have one. Her parents meant well, they always had. They'd dedicated their lives to teaching, pouring their hearts into their work, even with salaries so low they were often delayed for months. Autumn studied her daughter's face carefully. Something's bothering you? Madeline hesitated. Should she tell her about Grayson? But then she thought of her father's strict rules, his quiet restraint when it came to emotions. No, just tired from the trip, she said, avoiding her mother's gaze. Autumn didn't push. She kissed her daughter on the forehead, wished her good night, and quietly left the room. Madeline lay awake for a long time, her thoughts drifting back to the city, to her studies, and to Grayson. She also kept thinking about what Grandma Olivia had said earlier, about the gift. It sounded silly, sure, but somehow, in her grandmother's voice, even the most unbelievable things felt possible. The next morning brought an unexpected surprise. Her childhood friend Lila called. She'd heard Madeline was in town and was determined to see her. Just for a day. Come on, we'll hang out, catch up like old times. I've got so much to tell you. Over breakfast, Madeline mentioned the invite. To Lila's? In Rochester? Her father asked, setting down the newspaper. I suppose you could. But buses are unpredictable these days, you'd better stay overnight if you go. Maybe you shouldn't go at all, Grandma Olivia said suddenly, lifting her eyes from her teacup. Everyone turned to look at her. Olivia almost never weighed in on family decisions, she preferred to observe from the sidelines. Why not, Grandma? Madeline asked. I saw something, Olivia said softly but firmly. A bad sign. I had a dream, you were lost in a snowstorm, calling out, but I couldn't hear your voice. Don't go, Madeline. Wyatt exchanged a glance with his wife and gave a gentle smile. Mom, come on now. That's just superstition. Madeline's a grown woman, she'll be fine. Grown folks go missing too, Grandma Olivia said stubbornly. And I'm telling you, this trip doesn't feel right. I'll be careful, Madeline promised, trying to ease her grandmother's worry. I'll be at Lila's by evening, and I'll call as soon as I get there. Olivia shook her head but didn't say anything else. She just watched her granddaughter with a long, worried look. And as Madeline was leaving the room, Olivia called after her one last time. What was with these strange feelings Grandma Olivia kept having? And why now? But Madeline didn't dwell on it. She was looking forward to seeing her friend, finally getting to talk about Grayson with someone who wouldn't judge her, and just taking a break from being the daughter of two teachers. Standing at the bus stop, waiting in the cold, she made a mental note to tell Lila all about her grandma's warnings. She knew her friend would get a kick out of it. As for Madeline herself, she didn't have a shred of doubt that everything would be fine. The sun was shining, the snow crunched pleasantly under her boots, and she had a whole day of freedom ahead of her. When the bus arrived, she waved to Scarlett, who was still watching from down the road, then climbed aboard and settled into one of the hard seats, her eyes on the frosted window. Snowy fields drifted by, broken up by the occasional cluster of houses. Lila's apartment was on the second floor of a 5-story concrete block, standard Soviet-style housing. Just a one-bedroom, but Lila proudly called it, my palace. Compared to Madeline's family home with its wood stove and back extension, the place, with hot water and central heating, did feel pretty modern. Make yourself at home, Lila said, taking Madeline's coat. Only thing is, I don't think I've got an extra pair of slippers. It's okay, I'm fine in socks. Madeline kicked off her boots and walked into the room, which was a perfect mix of chaos and personality, textbooks scattered among fashion magazines, posters of pop singers on the wall, and a pile of clothes on the bed. "Sorry for the mess," Lila said, gathering up the clothes and tossing them onto a chair. "I keep meaning to clean up, but I never get around to it. Let me put the kettle on." Old friendship settled in easily, and soon the girls were in the kitchen, sipping tea and catching up. Lila was studying at a teaching college but dreamed of moving to New York after graduation. In her eyes, Rochester was a dead end. "So, what about your love life?" Lila asked, pouring them both tea. "Still no one." "I don't believe it." Madeline hesitated, then decided to tell her. "If not her childhood best friend, then who?" "There is someone. Grayson." Lila's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Spill it." And Madeline told her everything, how they met during hospital training, how attentive he was, and how, for the first time, she saw him not just as a classmate, but as a young man. She remembered the little things too, how Grayson gently corrected her during procedures, how he once brought her an apple to keep her energy up, how he always held the door open for her. "We talk a lot after class," she said. "He's really smart, into the history of medicine. Says even his great-grandfather was a doctor." Lila listened, chin resting on her hand, then raised an eyebrow. "So, have you kissed yet?" Madeline flushed. "No. Of course not." "Oh, I see," Lila sighed in disappointment. "Let me guess, meet the parents first, then a wedding, and maybe holding hands after that?" "I just want things to be right," Madeline said quietly. Lila snorted. "You're so old-fashioned. Nobody does that anymore. Savannah from my program already lives with Elijah, and they're not even married." "And Aubrey?" "She's hooking up with one of the professors. It's normal now. Even the parents are fine with it, it's just the way things are." "My parents wouldn't be," Madeline said softly. "Why do they get a say?" Lila shot back, suddenly getting up and pacing the kitchen. "Madeline, it's like you're living someone else's life in a completely different era. Are you really going to spend your whole youth waiting for Grayson to get serious?" "He already is," Madeline said, surprising even herself. "I mean, we've talked about the future. He wants to move to the city, apply to medical school. He says things are easier when you're together." "Oh really?" Lila stopped in her tracks. "So you're just going to wait around while he studies? What if he meets someone more flexible?" "Why would you say that?" Madeline felt something tighten inside her. "You don't even know him." "But I know his type," Lila shot back. "All those nice boys from good families. They waste your time and marry someone else. And you, still believing in fairy tales. You'll end up stuck, watching everyone else actually live their lives." Madeline set her cup down on the table. Her hands were trembling slightly. How had this conversation turned into an argument? And why did her childhood friend suddenly feel like a stranger, like there was a wall between them that hadn't been there before? "I think I'll head out," she said, standing up. "I can still catch the last bus." "Oh come on," Lila threw up her hands. "Why are you so upset?" "I'm just being honest. Stay the night, we can talk more." But something inside Madeline had already cracked. All she wanted now was to go home, to the quiet comfort of her family's old wooden house, to slow, peaceful talks with Grandma. "Thanks," she thought, "but I'm really better off leaving." She got ready quickly, said a curt goodbye, and stepped outside. The freezing air hit her lungs like ice. While she and Lila had been talking, dusk had settled. Now it was fully dark. Fine snow was falling, and the wind had picked up, sweeping it into twisting streams that danced along the empty streets. Madeline tightened her scarf and headed toward the bus stop. But when she got there, she found nothing but a frozen bench and silence. The schedule posted under the shelter confirmed her fear, the last bus had left half an hour ago. What now? She thought. Going back to Lila's felt out of the question. After that fight, it would just be awkward. Then she remembered there was a taxi stand somewhere downtown. She had enough money, her parents had given her some for small expenses. Pulling her coat tighter around her, she started walking down the snow-covered street. The town felt deserted. Only an occasional window glowed with light, and now and then, a car passed by. One of those cars, a dark foreign sedan, slowed down beside her. The window rolled down, and a man in his 40s leaned out. His face was firm, but not unfriendly. "Out so late, young lady? Need a ride?" Madeline instinctively stepped back. "No, thank you. I'm fine." Waiting for the bus, he asked with a polite smile. "It's already gone. I just came from the station." "And taxis?" "Not tonight. Only one guy runs them here, and he got drunk and drove straight into a snowbank." "You'll be waiting till morning in this weather?" Madeline hesitated. The offer felt sketchy, but the man's explanation made sense. And was she really going to freeze at a bus stop all night? "Come on," he said, opening the passenger door. "I promise, safe and sound. Name's Mason, by the way." It was warm inside the car. The leather seats smelled faintly of expensive cologne, and soft music played on the radio. Madeline stayed alert, but Mason was perfectly polite. "Where to?" he asked, pulling away from the curb. "North Hollow." "Know it," he nodded. "My business partner just built a hunting cabin out that way. Beautiful country." They drove in silence for a while. Then Mason spoke again. "So, what brings you to Rochester?" "School." "No, just visiting a friend." "And where are you from?" "I told you. North Hollow." "I mean where you really live," he said. "You don't seem local." Madeline tensed. "Why would you think that?" Mason smirked. "The way you carry yourself. The way you talk." Reluctantly, Madeline told him she was studying at a paramedic and midwifery college, home on break. But the conversation was starting to weigh on her, especially as his questions drifted into personal territory. "What do your parents do? Any siblings? Do you have a boyfriend?" The car suddenly turned off the main road, and Madeline's nerves spiked. "I think you took a wrong turn. North Hollow's the other way." "Shortcut," Mason waved her off. "I know this area well, avoiding traffic near the bridge." "What traffic? At this hour?" Madeline felt a surge of panic. "Please stop the car. I want to get out." Now, his voice changed, sharper, colder. "We were having such a nice chat." The car veered onto a narrow dirt road leading into the woods. At this point, Madeline had no more doubts, something was very wrong. She yanked the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. "No need to panic," Mason said as he slammed the brakes. "Let's just talk a little longer. In a different way." What happened next split Madeline's life into a clear before and after. Paralyzed by fear, she froze as the man grabbed her shoulders and yanked her toward him. She tried to fight back, but he was stronger. One hand held her in place while the other fumbled with the buttons on her coat. "Please, don't," Madeline's voice trembled. "Let me go." "Such a pretty girl," he whispered, his mouth near her ear. "Too pretty to just walk away." Time lost all meaning. It stretched and warped until it felt like she was watching it all happen from outside her own body, as if this was someone else's nightmare. A strange thought flashed through her mind: this is why Grandma didn't want me to go. Then came the pain. Sharp. Humiliating. Unbearable. At one point, when his grip loosened for a second, Madeline clawed at his face with everything she had. He recoiled, cursing. "You little bitch." The back of his hand cracked across her cheek. Darkness burst in her vision. But even through the pain and rising despair, she kept resisting, scratching, biting, shoving him away. Her fight only seemed to excite him more. What followed felt like a twisted dream. Madeline tried to dissociate, to sink deep inside herself. Images flickered in her mind: Grandma's herbal book, her mother's long braid, her father's glasses, the trees outside their home. Everything she cherished. Everything that now felt stolen, unreachable. In that moment, something inside her broke, like a thin sheet of ice snapping beneath weight. She could almost see the fracture within, a jagged line splitting her soul. On one side was the old Madeline, hopeful, open, trusting. On the other, someone new. Someone hollowed out by pain and burning shame. When it was over, Mason calmly adjusted his clothes and started the car. His face was blank, distant, as if nothing had happened. Without a word, he drove back to the main road. 30 minutes later, he pulled over at the edge of some small town. "Get out," he said coldly. "North Hollow's that way, about 2 kilometers." With trembling hands, Madeline gathered her torn clothes and tried to pull herself together. Tears streamed down her face, though she didn't sob. Her whole body was shaking in small, uncontrollable tremors. Her lips moved on their own, whispering fragments of thoughts that didn't make sense. "Be grateful I was gentle," Mason muttered as she stepped out of the car. "A lot of girls wouldn't have gotten off this easy. And don't say a word to anyone, or I'll find you, and you'll regret it. Got it?" Madeline didn't answer. She stood by the side of the road, clutching her bag to her chest, watching as the car drove away. Only when it disappeared around a bend did she drop to her knees in the snow and break down, crying loudly, desperately, with everything she had left in her. She barely remembered how she made it back to North Hollow. Her mind was blank. Her body moved on its own. The cold sliced through her like glass, but it couldn't compare to the frozen void that had opened up inside her. The house greeted her with the warm yellow glow of its windows. As she stepped inside, her mother rushed out to meet her. "Madeline? You were supposed to stay the night at your friend's." The familiar scent of home, with smoke and herbs, hit her like a wave. Madeline walked past her silently, avoiding eye contact. But her mother noticed the messy hair, the ripped dress beneath her coat, the dark bruise on her cheek. "What happened to you?" Autumn's voice trembled, a mix of fear and a creeping sense of realization. "What happened?" Her father appeared in the hallway, followed by Grandma Olivia. The moment Madeline saw her grandmother, she broke down again. The old woman rushed forward, wrapped her in her arms, and held her tight. "Oh Lord," Olivia whispered, "we didn't protect her." "What's going on?" Wyatt demanded, his voice rough with panic. Madeline couldn't speak, didn't want to. "Where have you been this late?" Fear made his tone harsher. "Why do you look like that?" The words hit Madeline like a slap. She'd expected comfort, but heard judgment instead. Her knees gave out, and if not for Olivia, she would have collapsed. "Quiet, Wyatt," Olivia said, her voice low but commanding. "Can't you see? The girl's barely standing." She led Madeline to her room, helped her undress, and tucked her into bed. Autumn stood in the doorway, pale, frozen, unsure. What happened to her? Olivia didn't answer. She gave Madeline a hot herbal drink, bitter, earthy, and whispered something soothing as she held her. Then she turned and quietly ushered everyone out, even Scarlett, who was peeking around her mother with wide, frightened eyes. "Tomorrow," the old woman said softly. "We'll deal with it all tomorrow. Let the girl rest tonight." But Madeline couldn't sleep. She was shivering, despite the thick blanket and the heat from the stove. Through the wall, she could hear her family arguing. Her father's voice rang out in anger. "This is how you raised her. You let her run wild. Wandering off with who knows who, and now look what happened. And why is it all on me?" Autumn snapped back. "You're her father too, in case you forgot." Then came Grandma Olivia's voice, quiet but clear. "It's not your daughter you should be blaming. It's yourselves, for not protecting her. Madeline covered her ears. She didn't want to hear any of it. One thought kept pulsing in her head, why? Why did this happen to me? But there was no answer. Only emptiness. And pain. Dull, aching, endless pain. In the morning, she pretended to be asleep, just to avoid facing her parents. Olivia brought her breakfast, but Madeline couldn't eat a bite. The old woman didn't ask questions. She just laid a cool hand on her forehead and sighed. Oh, my poor girl. 2 weeks later, before the holiday break was over, Madeline left for the city. She couldn't stay in that house any longer, where every glance felt like judgment, every word like a quiet accusation. Even Olivia's love couldn't drown out the guilt and shame that had rooted themselves inside her. Before leaving, she stood for a long time in front of the old mirror in the hallway, staring at her reflection. It felt like someone else was looking back, sunken eyes, pale lips, a stranger's face. A girl who looked broken. Nothing like the Madeline she used to be. Here, Grandma Olivia said, handing her a small bundle. My herbal. Take it with you. And with it, my love, and my faith in you. Remember, only what's already dead can be truly broken. And you're alive. You'll live on. Clutching the precious book to her chest, Madeline boarded the bus. Her temples throbbed with one repeating thought, never again. I'll never go back to that old life. And yet, deep inside, there was still a thread of hope, thin, but strong, tying her to everything that once mattered. Her grandmother's herbal, her grandmother's faith, her grandmother's wisdom. That remained, even when everything else had fallen apart. Spring came early to the city, but Madeline didn't notice the melting snow or the timid green buds on the trees. Her world had shrunk, dorm rooms, lecture halls, hospital corridors. She moved through it all like a shadow, more out of habit than will. Lectures, rotations, textbooks, she did it all on autopilot. Her face was blank, like a wax mask, only occasionally betraying the pain that flickered in her eyes. She still saw Grayson in class. He noticed the change right away. At first, he was gentle, but soon became more persistent, trying to understand what had happened. Did something happen during the break? Why don't you answer my notes? You've shut everyone out. Madeline just shook her head. Nothing. Just tired. She couldn't tell him. The shame was too heavy, like a burning collar tightening every time she even thought about what had happened. Sometimes it felt like her attacker had left a mark on her that everyone could see. Like everyone knew. In those moments, all she wanted was to disappear, hide from the world. Her own body felt foreign, like it had betrayed her. And it reminded her of itself in cruel ways, waves of nausea out of nowhere. The first time it happened was on the bus, a sudden whiff of a man's cologne, and she was doubled over, vomiting in front of horrified passengers. After that, the morning sickness became routine. But Madeline refused to see the truth. She pushed away the creeping thoughts. It's just stress, she told herself. It'll pass. Then one morning, after another bout of nausea, her roommate Isla, cheerful, slightly chubby, and always direct, asked bluntly. Madeline, are you pregnant? The world tilted. Madeline clutched the edge of the sink to stay upright. The suspicion she'd been avoiding suddenly had a shape and sound. Real. That's not possible, she whispered. It can't be. Okay, Isla said with a shrug, though her eyes were kind. But you should still go to the clinic. Just in case. The small hospital where the students did their training had a tired-looking OB/GYN. She'd seen everything in her career. Madeline gave a vague account, just symptoms, no details. The doctor didn't press. She just sent her for tests. 6 to 7 weeks along, the doctor said after looking at the results. So, have you decided? What do you mean? Madeline asked, her voice hollow. I mean, are you keeping it, or? The doctor spun her pen slowly between her fingers. If you're going to terminate, do it soon. You still have time. Madeline walked out of the office in a daze, her legs barely carrying her. The spring sun, the laughter, the fresh green, everything felt like a cruel joke. Inside her, it was nothing but blackness. There's a child growing inside me, a child of violence and hatred, the words thudded in her head. How could I ever love it? That night, for the first time since that awful day, Madeline cried, silently, her face buried in the pillow so she wouldn't wake Isla. These weren't healing tears. They burned like acid, eating away at what was left of her. Isla gave her the address of a pharmacist she knew, someone who helped girls sometimes. Madeline found a door in a basement under an old building. The air smelled of mildew, alcohol, and old medicine. A bleached blonde woman of indeterminate age gave her a long, appraising look. How far along? Almost 2 months. It'll cost more. I have money. Madeline had her scholarship and a bit of savings set aside. But instead of reaching for her wallet, she suddenly said, I'll think about it, and rushed out into the street. Later, Isla looked at her in surprise. You changed your mind? Madeline didn't answer. She couldn't explain it, but back there, in that dim room full of medicine and alcohol, she suddenly remembered Grandma Olivia's words about the value of every life. Everything happens by God's will, the old woman used to say. There was only one person Madeline felt she could truly open up to. She packed a small bag and told her school she was taking academic leave for family reasons. Then she boarded a bus and headed back to North Hollow, to Olivia. Her childhood home greeted her with a quiet tension. Her mother opened the door, saw the suitcase, and instantly understood. No, it can't be. She glanced nervously toward the bedroom door, as if afraid her husband might hear. Yes, Mom, Madeline said, for the first time out loud. A strange sense of relief washed over her. I'm pregnant. Autumn covered her face with her hands. Oh God, Madeline, how could this happen? Is Grandma Olivia home? Madeline asked instead of answering. The reunion with her grandmother was different. Olivia looked smaller, more fragile than before, but when she pulled Madeline into an embrace, her grip was fierce. I could feel it, she whispered. You're carrying heavy news. They talked long into the evening, sitting in Olivia's small room. Madeline told her everything, the assault, the nightmares, the paralyzing guilt, the fear. The old woman listened without interrupting. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she let Madeline speak it all. My sweet girl, she said when the story was done. Sometimes life tests us so hard, it feels like we won't survive it. But remember, nothing happens without meaning. She stood up slowly and pulled a worn wooden box from her chest. From it, she took a deck of old, time-worn cards. These aren't for fortune-telling, she explained, seeing the look on Madeline's face. They help show the path. My mother gave them to me. Her mother gave them to her. She laid the cards out on the table in a strange, deliberate pattern. Her wrinkled fingers traced each one as she studied them in silence. Finally, she gathered them back into the box. You remember what I told you? The gift of foresight runs in our blood, skips a generation. Your mother didn't get it. But you did. It's just asleep. What gift, Grandma? Madeline asked wearily. What future can there be? I'm just ruined. Not all wounds stay wounds, Olivia said quietly. Some pain becomes the root of strength, if you let it. Your gift will awaken, child. Through suffering, through what shakes your soul, that's how it's always been for us. And the baby? Madeline asked, voice barely above a whisper. What do I do with her? Olivia took her hands, dry and warm, filled with the wisdom of generations. Don't think of this child as a curse, she said firmly. This baby will be your salvation, even if you can't see it yet. I can feel it, it's a girl. And through her, you'll find your strength again. Madeline lowered her head. How could I ever love her? Every time I look at her, I'll remember. A child's soul is pure, Olivia cut in gently. She's innocent. None of this is her fault. And you'll love her, you will. The moment you hold her, your heart will know what to do. They sat in silence for a moment. There's one more thing, Olivia said suddenly. You'll see him again, the one who hurt you. Not soon, but one day. And it'll be a test of your spirit. When that moment comes, remember this: revenge poisons the soul of the avenger more than the one it's aimed at. You'll have power in your hands, but what matters is how you choose to use it. Madeline wanted to argue, but Olivia was overtaken by a deep, racking cough. Madeline rushed to get her some water, helped her drink, and eased her into bed. By nightfall, her grandmother seemed better, and Madeline went to her room, where Scarlett was already asleep, breathing softly. The next morning, as everyone sat down for breakfast, Madeline spoke up. I'm keeping the baby. Autumn gasped. Madeline, be serious. You're only 19. You've got school, your whole life ahead of you. And the family's reputation, her father added darkly. Did you think about that? About me and your mother? About Scarlett? What will people say? Autumn continued. Unmarried, with a baby, no degree, what will you do? Madeline didn't answer. She had no speech prepared, only the quiet certainty that had settled in her after the night with Grandma Olivia. This child had to be born. Somehow, she would manage. She would survive. Then at the very least, you're introducing us to the father, Wyatt insisted. That boy you wrote about, Grayson. Grayson, Madeline corrected absently. But, he's not the father. She said it so softly, it took a moment to register. When it did, a heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Autumn asked, hesitantly. Then who? Madeline didn't answer. She couldn't say it out loud, not the full truth. Not yet. Wyatt shoved his plate away with a sharp motion. Figures. What's that supposed to mean, Dad? Madeline flared suddenly. That your daughter's a slut, is that it? That's what you'll tell your coworkers? That your perfect little straight-A girl turned out to be a disgrace? Enough, he snapped, slamming his fist on the table. Don't you dare speak like that in this house. How am I supposed to speak? She cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. How am I supposed to live now? Olivia, who had been silently watching the fight unfold, finally spoke. Stop it. This is a sin. That girl's already been through hell. You knew. Autumn turned to her in shock. You knew all this and said nothing. It wasn't my place to speak, Olivia replied calmly. Scarlett sat frozen, wide-eyed, silently watching the storm around her. At last, Wyatt stood up. Here's how it is, Madeline. You've got two choices. Either you get rid of the baby and go back to school, or, he paused, taking a breath, or you leave this house. Decide. Wyatt. Autumn cried out. How can you say that? What else can we do? He snapped, adjusting his glasses. We spent our whole lives building a reputation, and she's about to destroy it overnight. What am I supposed to tell people? That I teach their kids right from wrong, but couldn't raise my own. Madeline, Autumn turned to her, her voice shaking. Please try to understand the world we live in. How are you going to raise a child alone? And what about Scarlett? How will she live with this shame? Madeline stood up from the table. Something inside her had turned to stone, no tears, no pain, just a quiet, unshakable resolve. I understand. I'll leave today. She went upstairs and began packing. Scarlett ran in after her. Madeline, don't go, her little sister cried, throwing her arms around her neck. "I don't want you to leave." Madeline hugged her tightly. "I don't want to either, Scarlett. But this is for the best. For everyone." "But what about me?" the girl whimpered. "What about us? You'll write me letters. And I'll write back. And when the baby's born, you'll be an aunt. Can you imagine?" The thought seemed to comfort Scarlett a little. "Will it be a boy or a girl?" "Grandma says it's a girl." "Then I'll draw her a princess," Scarlett declared, wiping her tears. "The most beautiful one." Their father stayed in his room while Madeline packed. Their mother paced between her husband and daughter, torn but silent. In the end, she didn't argue with him. She simply slipped an envelope into Madeline's hand. "Here. Take this, for now, at least." Before leaving, Madeline stopped by Olivia's room to say goodbye. "I'll come back, Grandma. I promise." "I know you will, sweetheart," the old woman said, crossing herself and gently blessing her great-granddaughter. "Take care of yourself. And take care of that child." Madeline returned to the city on an evening bus. Not to the dorm, too many eyes, too many whispers, but to Grayson, who rented a small room in a private house. She needed to talk to him, to tell the truth. And if he turned away too, well, she would survive that too. Grayson greeted her with a mix of worry and relief. "Madeline. I was so worried. You just disappeared, no goodbye, no explanation." In his tiny room, thick with the scent of tobacco and men's cologne, Madeline told him everything. Grayson listened in silence, his face shifting, first sympathy, then shock, then helpless confusion. "We have to go to the police," he said at last. "We have to find that bastard Anne." "And what?" Madeline cut in with a bitter smile. "Prove it was rape." 3 months later. "It's my word against his." Grayson ran a hand through his hair. "God, Madeline, if I'd known. If I'd been there." "Don't blame yourself." She reached out, touched his hand for the first time in so long. "It's not your fault." "And the baby?" he asked gently. "Have you made a decision?" "I'm keeping it," she said firmly. "It's my choice. I'm not asking you to." "Wait," he interrupted. "Do you realize what that means? Every day, every hour, you'll look at that child and remember." "It's not his fault," Madeline said quietly, echoing Olivia's words. Grayson stood, pacing the room, 2 steps forward, 2 back. "Madeline. I don't know what to say. I need time to process this. But one thing I do know, I couldn't do it. If I were in your place, I just couldn't." They talked through the night. Grayson offered different solutions: abortion, adoption, even a fake marriage to help her out. He meant well, but with every hour that passed, Madeline could feel the gap between them widening. "I thought we were building a future together," he said near dawn. "But you're choosing the past." "No," Madeline shook her head. "I'm choosing the future. It's just not the same one, you see. You've always been stronger than me," he admitted suddenly. "I admired that. Still do. But I can't. I can't live with this." "Then I'll build my future on my own," Madeline said, standing up. "Goodbye, Grayson. And thank you, for caring, for listening. For everything." She walked out without looking back. The morning city was quiet, almost deserted. Ahead of her lay uncertainty, loneliness, and struggle. But deep inside, a small spark of hope flickered. She would manage. She had to. For the child. For herself. For her grandmother, who still believed in her. A week later, Madeline received a telegram from home: "Grandma Olivia is very ill. Come immediately." She packed within the hour, but at the station, she was told the next bus wouldn't leave until the following day. After a sleepless night on a bench, she finally made it to North Hollow by morning. The front gate stood open. Neighbors were gathered in the yard. From inside the house came the sound of women weeping. Madeline's heart sank when she saw the priest stepping out of the house, a thin man with a full, graying beard. "Your grandmother passed yesterday," a neighbor said through tears. Madeline walked slowly up the porch steps. Her legs felt numb. Bright spots danced before her eyes. "I wasn't there," her mind echoed. "I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make it in time." Inside the house, on the table, sat the old copper-trimmed chest, the one with the herbs and cards. On top lay a note, "For my Madeline. From Grandma Olivia." Somehow, knowing her grandmother had sensed the end and left her this last gift made Madeline's knees buckle. She clutched the chest to her heart, and finally, the tears came. Bitter, cleansing tears, not only for Grandma Olivia, but for the old Madeline, the girl who had been left behind on the other side of an invisible, irreversible line. She didn't realize she wasn't crying alone. Her mother, Autumn, was beside her now, quietly sobbing into her daughter's shoulder. Two women, two generations, bound by grief and blood. And a third, a tiny heartbeat still growing inside Madeline, unknowingly becoming the keeper of their family's memory. The village cemetery was peaceful. Not the kind of silence that crushes the soul, but the gentle quiet that feels like nature itself is saying farewell. Madeline stood by the fresh grave, holding the time-worn chest, her last connection to the woman who had loved her without condition. "It's time to go, Madeline," her father said softly, touching her shoulder. "The guests are waiting." Wyatt spoke without coldness, but without warmth either. Olivia's death had quieted their family conflict, but it hadn't resolved it. "Just a minute," Madeline asked. He nodded and stepped away. She looked down at the grave. "Why, Grandma," she whispered. "Why didn't you wait for me? Why didn't we get to say goodbye? How am I supposed to go on without your wisdom? Without your faith in me?" The only answer was the rustling of leaves in the trees. But then she felt it, a faint warmth, like a soft hand brushing gently over her hair. A strange calm settled over her. The memorial meal was quiet and proper, just as it should be in a village. Neighbors spoke kindly of Olivia, her kindness, her wisdom. The elders shared memories, seeing her soul off on its final journey. Autumn kept busy around the table, hiding how heavy her heart truly was. Scarlett clung to Madeline now and then, afraid she might vanish again. When the guests had left, her parents asked her to sit down for a talk. On the oilcloth-covered table lay an envelope. "Your mother and I have talked," Wyatt began. "We can't undo what's been said. But staying in the village isn't an option either." "Wyatt," Autumn said softly, but he continued. "My aunt knows a midwife who can help you get a job at a maternity hospital, as a cleaner. It's closer to your field, there's staff housing, and no one there knows your past. Once the baby is born, well, we'll see. Maybe you'll change your mind by then. And this," he pushed the envelope toward her, "a bit of money. Enough to get started." Madeline stared at the envelope in silence. She needed the money, but tears of hurt clouded her eyes. Even now, her parents weren't thinking about how to help, they just wanted the problem gone as quickly and quietly as possible. On one condition, her father added, that you don't embarrass the family. Stay quiet until this all blows over. And don't write anything inappropriate to Scarlett. She's still just a child. Inappropriate? Madeline repeated, barely keeping her anger in check. What do you mean, Dad? That her sister's having a baby? Or that her parents are kicking her out so the neighbors don't gossip? Madeline, her mother tried to intervene, but her voice lacked its usual firmness. Madeline picked up the envelope and stood. Thanks for the concern. I'll leave in the morning. That night, she didn't sleep. Scarlett crawled under the blanket beside her, sniffling, and promised to write every week. Madeline stroked her sister's hair, hiding her own tears. Grandma's chest sat open by the bed. All evening, Madeline sifted through its contents: yellowed photographs, letters from the front, a worn prayer book. Beneath a stack of papers, she found a small jewelry box. Inside was an old ring with a deep violet stone. Amethyst, she whispered, remembering Olivia's stories. The stone of second sight. She slipped it on. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. And somehow, her heart felt lighter, like her grandmother had just blessed her one last time. That morning, Madeline left her parents' home. Only Scarlett came to see her off. Her parents couldn't leave work at the school. The goodbye was short, but heavy. Scarlett handed her an envelope. Open it on the bus. It's for you. On board, Madeline found a child's drawing inside, clumsy but made with care. 3 stick figures, one tall, one smaller, and one tiny. Written in wobbly letters, Madeline, me, and your baby. Despite her father's advice, Madeline returned to the city where she had studied. It was the only place where she still had some kind of connection, familiar faces, the dorms, the slim hope of continuing her education. But one by one, every plan crumbled. The dorm supervisor, once warm and welcoming, now pursed her lips at the sight of her. You don't look pregnant yet, but you will soon. This isn't a shelter. If you're not a student, you can't stay here. Grayson avoided her now, looking away when they passed in the hall. Her classmates, once friendly, kept their distance. They sympathized, but only from afar, as if afraid her misfortune might rub off on them. Finding a job proved even harder. In your condition? HR reps shook their heads. Sorry, we need someone full-time. Who'll cover for you when you go on maternity leave? Her money was vanishing fast. The only place she could afford was a tiny room on the city's edge, rented by a half-deaf old woman who asked no questions. But even those last savings were nearly gone. Desperate, Madeline decided to try one last time. She would return to the dorm and beg the supervisor for just a couple more weeks, enough time to find something else. As she approached the building, her steps slowed. What could she say? How would she explain everything? She was 20 now, but felt like a lost child in a strange city. The old supervisor was gone. A new woman sat at the front desk, a stranger, older, with sharp eyes. Hi, Madeline began uncertainly. Where's Hazel? She's unwell, the woman replied, giving her a measuring look. I'm Chloe. I'm covering for her. What do you need? Madeline hesitated, but there was something in the woman's gaze, direct, but not unkind, that gave her the courage to speak. She told her everything. About the pregnancy. The academic leave. The disappearing money. The failed search for housing. Chloe listened without interrupting. When Madeline finally finished, stumbling over her words, the woman asked. How's your medical training? Were you doing well? I guess so, Madeline replied, caught off guard. I was in my 3rd year, just had state exams left. And what now? I want to finish school after the baby's born. I thought about med school, but now? I don't know. I just need to survive. Chloe tapped a pencil against the desk, thinking. You can't stay here, she said finally. The rules are strict, you know that. But, there's another option. She paused, clearly weighing her words. I have a big old house. Got it from my parents. My son works shifts, he's barely home. And truth be told, I wouldn't mind some help around the place. I've got a spare room. There's enough space. Madeline blinked in disbelief. You're offering, but you don't even know me. Sometimes, Chloe said, you see more of a person in 1 minute than in a whole year. Think about it. It's this, or nothing. 2 hours later, they were on their way to Chloe's house. She had asked a neighbor for a ride to the home on the edge of town, where a new chapter in Madeline's life was about to begin. The house was 2 stories, old but solid and well kept. Inside, it smelled of fresh pastries and herbs that instantly reminded Madeline of her grandmother Olivia's room. The room Chloe offered her was simple but cozy, a neatly made bed, a dresser, and a small desk by the window. "Make yourself at home," Chloe said. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall, kitchens downstairs. I handle the cleaning, but you're welcome to cook if you like." "I want to pay," Madeline said firmly. "Whatever amount you decide." Chloe gave her a long, thoughtful look. "We'll talk about that when you find a job. For now, just rest. You look like you've been through enough." In the first few days, Madeline stayed cautious. The whole situation felt almost too good to be true. But it didn't take long to see that Chloe was exactly who she appeared to be, a woman of her word. A retired nurse, Chloe picked up odd jobs when she could. Sometimes filling in at the dorms, sometimes helping out at the hospital when they were short-staffed. She lived modestly, but with dignity. Little by little, over evening tea, the 2 women started opening up to each other. Chloe told stories from her life, how she lost her husband, a war veteran, to illness after the fighting ended. How she raised her son alone. How she scraped by during the hardest years. Madeline often found herself thinking how much Chloe reminded her of Olivia, not in appearance, but in spirit. That same quiet strength. That same deep wisdom. But where Olivia had been rooted in old traditions, Chloe stood firmly in the present, facing the future with open eyes. Within a week, Madeline no longer felt like a tenant. She gladly helped around the house, made dinner when Chloe worked late. In return, Chloe shared her medical knowledge, even helped Madeline study for the state exams she hoped to take after the baby was born. One evening, the front door slammed open and a tall man in his early 30s walked in, broad-shouldered but slightly hunched. "Mom, I'm home," he called out. Then stopped cold when he saw Madeline. "Who's this?" "This is Madeline," Chloe said as she stepped out of the kitchen, drying her hands with a towel. "She's staying with us. And this is Caleb, my son." Madeline felt awkward under his gaze. He smelled faintly of motor oil and stale beer, but his eyes weren't unkind, just surprised and a little confused. "Of course," he said in a low voice after a pause. He hung up his jacket and disappeared into the kitchen. Later, after Caleb had gone to his room, Chloe shared his story. He had loved a girl since school, but she ended up choosing his best friend. Caleb never showed how much it hurt, just kept it all inside. Eventually, he married someone else, out of heartbreak, Chloe believed. The marriage didn't last. They divorced after a year, and since then, he'd shut himself off, buried himself in work. He was a machinist at the factory, and on weekends, he'd sometimes drink to forget. "He's a good man," Chloe sighed. "Just lonely. Like you." Madeline pretended not to notice the hint, but her heart clenched. The memory of Grayson was still too fresh, and the thought of starting something new was too frightening. Days passed. Her belly grew rounder, and then one day, she felt the baby kick for the first time. It was so sudden and so moving that she gasped out loud. "What is it?" Chloe looked up from her newspaper, concerned. "She's kicking," Madeline whispered, placing her hand on her belly. For the first time, so clearly. Chloe smiled warmly. "Then she's strong. Can I feel?" She reached out, and Madeline gently guided her hand to the curve of her stomach. "Oh. She is." Chloe grinned. "It's a girl, I can tell you that right now." "How do you know?" Madeline asked, surprised. "Old midwife's instinct. And there's a saying too. Plus, I've seen enough to know, got an eye for these things." From that day, something shifted between them. Chloe became even more caring, making sure Madeline ate well, brewing her herbal teas, helping her prepare for labor. Caleb, too, slowly began adjusting to Madeline's presence. At first, he kept his distance, but over time, he started coming home more often. He drank less. Sometimes he helped with heavy chores around the house. One day, he brought in an old crib, faded but sturdy. "It was mine," he said, looking down. "Figured you could use it." Madeline didn't know what to say. She just nodded, swallowing back tears. There was something steady and dependable about this quiet man, something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. At night, Madeline began having strange dreams. Her grandmother often visited, not frail and weak, as she'd last seen her, but strong and radiant, her eyes full of light. In one of those dreams, Olivia held the hand of a little girl with dark curls and serious eyes. "Protect her," Grandma said, bringing the child closer. "She is your destiny. And your path." Madeline woke with her heart pounding. Dawn was just breaking outside the window. The room smelled of something fresh and achingly familiar, herbs like the ones Grandma Olivia used to gather, and wax candles, like the ones that always burned quietly in the corner of her room. Moved by an impulse she didn't fully understand, Madeline reached into her nightstand and pulled out her grandmother's chest. She opened the herbal journal. On a yellowed page she hadn't noticed before, written in neat, delicate handwriting, were the words. "For Madeline. Remember, family is not made by blood, but by love. Your child is your blessing, no matter the weight her arrival brings. With faith and hope, Grandma Olivia." Madeline clutched the book to her chest. Tears filled her eyes, but not the bitter kind she had cried before. These were clear, cleansing, full of something she hadn't felt in a long time, peace. In that moment, she understood with certainty, she would be okay. She had found the strength to go on, not just for herself, or even for her child, but for something greater. For the love that tied generations together. For the memory of those who came before her, and for the hope of those who would come after. Outside, a new morning bloomed, the first morning of her new life. Then the pain came again, in waves. Relentless, crashing, and all-consuming. It gave her brief moments to breathe, then tore through her again, threatening to split her open from the inside out. Madeline clenched her jaw to keep from screaming. The white ceiling of the delivery room blurred in front of her. All she could think was, let it end. Please, just let it end. Hang in there, sweetheart, the midwife said, dabbing sweat from her forehead. Almost there. The head's coming. Push. For a second, Madeline thought she was dying. The pain was so total it shattered her. But in the middle of that suffering, came a sudden, startling clarity. She saw Grandma Olivia's face, calm, radiant, as if she were sitting beside her, holding her hand. "You'll make it," her lips seemed to whisper. "You're my blood. You're strong." And then, release. Sudden. Overwhelming. Absolute. Silence. Followed, a heartbeat later, by a sharp, fierce cry. "A girl," the midwife's voice broke through the ringing in Madeline's ears. "Healthy and strong. Just look at this little beauty." Madeline pushed herself up on her elbows, and the world seemed to stop as they placed a tiny, wet, wrinkled bundle on her chest. The baby girl stopped crying, her eyes, dark as the night sky, opened wide, as if trying to absorb everything around her. Tiny fingers curled and clung tightly to a strand of Madeline's hair. Then something happened, something beyond explanation. A wave of love, fierce and unconditional, surged through Madeline, flooding every inch of her being. It wasn't the quiet affection that had grown over the past months as she felt her baby move inside her. This was something primal. Overwhelming. It shattered fear, erased doubt. "Mine," her pulse whispered. "My blood, my soul, my life." "What will you name her?" the midwife asked as the nurse finished her work. "Sienna," Madeline replied without hesitation. The name came to her instantly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Sienna, strong, ancient, passed down through generations. It was the name of her great-great-grandmother, a midwife and healer, a woman who, as Grandma Olivia often told, delivered babies and whispered blessings to protect them from harm. When Chloe came to pick them up from the hospital, Madeline explained the choice. Chloe nodded approvingly. It's a good name. Home welcomed them with warmth and fresh air. Chloe had made sure everything was ready: crisp linens, polished floors. Even Caleb had helped set up a cozy little corner for the baby, awkwardly but earnestly. The first weeks blurred into a whirlwind of feedings, changings, sleepless nights, and aching exhaustion. Her body hurt, the stitches throbbed, and little Sienna seemed determined to test her mother's strength. She cried through the nights, refused to sleep unless held, demanded attention around the clock. Yet in the middle of all that chaos were moments of pure joy. When Sienna, full and content, would fall asleep on Madeline's chest, breathing softly through her tiny nose. When she opened her eyes and calmed at the sound of her mother's voice, as if recognizing her. When her tiny fingers grasped Madeline's hand with surprising strength. Chloe was a lifesaver. She knew every trick, every soothing technique for a fussy newborn. When Sienna was writhing from colic, Chloe showed Madeline how to lay a warm cloth on her belly, how to massage gently in circles, how to hold her just right to ease the pain. "Ah, Madeline, you're lucky," Chloe would say while rocking the now peaceful baby, giving the exhausted new mother a chance to sleep for an hour or two. "When Caleb was born, I had no one. My husband was working out of town, my mother was sick. I had to figure everything out on my own, from books and neighbor gossip." Madeline received nothing more than a dry phone call from her parents. Autumn was the one who called, speaking in clipped, rehearsed phrases. "Congratulations on the baby girl. We've sent some money through a postal transfer. Your father sends his regards, but he can't talk, he's in a staff meeting." But Scarlett, defying her parents' orders, secretly wrote warm, handwritten letters to her sister, messy, full of spelling mistakes, but so sincere they brought Madeline to tears. "Dear Madeline, I really want to see your baby girl. What does she look like? Does she have hair? What color is it? I drew a princess for her, sending it with this letter. I love you very, very much. And I love your baby too. Your sister, Scarlett." Madeline treated Scarlett's drawings like treasures. She carefully placed them in a special folder, saving them to show Sienna when she was older. "Look here," she imagined saying one day, "your aunt drew this just for you when you were very little." Caleb, at first, kept his distance, awkward, unsure of how to act around a baby. But slowly, he began to show interest. He started by quietly peeking into the crib, then offered to help with bath time. One day, Madeline walked in and found him leaning over a sleeping Sienna with such tenderness on his face that it made her heart ache. "She looks just like you," he said, noticing her in the doorway. "Same eyebrows, same little nose. You think so?" Madeline stepped closer, studying her daughter's peaceful face. She tried not to think about who else Sienna might resemble. She didn't look for traces of the man who had hurt her. She simply loved her child. And with each passing day, that love grew, stronger, deeper, more natural. As Sienna grew, Madeline began to notice unusual things about her daughter. She was incredibly sensitive to the moods around her. She'd cry when tension filled the house, and smile when the air was calm and happy. When Sienna was 8 months old, something strange happened. The evening before what had been a perfectly clear summer day, the baby became fussy. She wouldn't eat, cried for no reason. And the next morning, an intense storm rolled in, one of the worst the area had seen in years. By the time Sienna turned 1, Madeline knew it was time to go back to school. She was working part-time as a nurse at a nearby hospital in the mornings while Chloe cared for the baby. But it wasn't enough. "I can't stay boxed in forever," she confessed to Chloe one day. "I need to study. I want a real career. I need to finish nursing school, maybe even go to medical school. Grandma Olivia believed I'd make a good doctor. And now I believe it too. Then you're thinking the right way, Chloe nodded. Let's figure it out. The chief at our hospital knows me well. I'll put in a good word, see if we can get you officially hired part-time, with proper paperwork. And I'll help with the baby. You go learn. And so began a new chapter in Madeline's life, studying, working, and motherhood all at once. Her days became even busier, but in the whirlwind of responsibilities, there was so much meaning, so much life, that the exhaustion felt like a small price to pay for the fullness she had found. Caleb started staying home more in the evenings, helping with Sienna. What grew between him and Madeline wasn't a fiery romance, it was something deeper, sturdier. Trust. Respect. A quiet understanding. The turning point came when Sienna was about 18 months old. She was babbling constantly, had a few clear words under her belt, and had just begun taking her first wobbly steps. One evening, Caleb came home from work, tired and worn. Sienna spotted him, broke into a wide smile, reached out her arms, and clearly said, "Daddy." Everything stopped. Madeline froze in surprise. Chloe's eyes welled up with emotion. And Caleb? Caleb looked like something inside him had cracked wide open. His eyes filled with a kind of light Madeline had never seen in him before. He dropped to his knees, opened his arms, and Sienna waddled toward him, burying her face in his shoulder. "Maybe it really is time for a new beginning," he said quietly that night as he and Madeline sat alone in the kitchen. "I've thought about it a lot. About you. About Sienna. About us. I'm not rushing you," he added gently, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes. "I just want you to know, I mean it. And I'll wait as long as it takes." They had a small wedding. Intimate. Simple. Chloe beamed with joy, seeing her son, who had once sought comfort in alcohol, transformed by the woman and child who had become his family. They invited only those dearest to them, a few of Madeline's co-workers, a handful of Caleb's friends from the factory. The only family there was Scarlett, who had snuck away from home using a school field trip as an excuse. Now a teenager, she looked at her sister with admiration and couldn't stop staring at Sienna. "She's a miracle," Scarlett whispered when they were alone. "Mom and Dad don't know what they're missing. I tell them about you all the time, but it's like they don't hear me." "Don't worry," Madeline said softly. "Their pain needs time too. Bitterness and pride, they're like scars on the heart. But time can heal even those." Scarlett hugged her tightly. "You've changed. You're wiser." "Life made me," Madeline replied with a smile. But her eyes held no bitterness, only calm, quiet strength. 3 years had passed. Sienna was growing into an extraordinary child, gentle, yet strong-willed, wise beyond her years, and with a gaze that seemed to see the world differently. Madeline had graduated nursing school with honors and gone on to enroll in medical school. She juggled her studies with a job in the hospital's surgical department, starting as a dressing nurse, but quickly earning the respect of her colleagues through hard work and quiet determination. Caleb still worked at the same factory but had since moved from the workshop into the design office. Life wasn't easy, but it was steady, and for the first time in a long time, it felt full of possibility. One winter evening, the family was gathered around the dinner table. Sienna, poking thoughtfully at her porridge, suddenly looked up and stared out the window. "Grandma's coming," she said. Everyone exchanged puzzled glances. "Sweetheart, I'm right here," Chloe said gently, stroking the girl's hair. "Not you," Sienna shook her head. "The other grandma. She has flowers." Caleb looked at Madeline in confusion, but Madeline had gone still, overcome by a strange sense of anticipation. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Standing on the doorstep was Autumn. In her hands, she held a bouquet of carnations. "Hello, sweetheart," her voice wavered, but she held it steady. "I came to meet my granddaughter. If you'll let me." Madeline stepped aside in silence, letting her mother into the house. It felt like a dream, and yet it also felt completely natural, as if part of her had always known this day would come. Sienna walked into the hallway, studying the unfamiliar woman with quiet curiosity. Then, without hesitation, she reached out her hand and said softly, "Hi, Grandma. I've been waiting for you." In that moment, Autumn crumbled. She sank to her knees on the threshold, sobbing, clutching her granddaughter's tiny hand to her chest. Madeline watched them, and all the bitterness that had built up over the years slowly began to melt away, making room for something new, understanding, forgiveness, and the fragile hope of healing. Caleb stepped beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" Madeline nodded, feeling something inside her settle at last. The circle was closing. The past, finally, was letting go, making space for the present. And the memory carried in her blood reminded her of what mattered most: love. The kind that can heal even the deepest wounds. The September morning was cool but bright. Sienna, dressed in a crisp new school uniform, spun in front of the mirror, adjusting her pristine white bows while Madeline packed her backpack for her first day of school. 5 years had flown by, her daughter was already a schoolgirl. "Nervous?" Madeline asked, noticing how Sienna fiddled with the strap of her bag. "No, Mommy," the girl replied quickly, though her small fingers betrayed her nerves. "I already know everything: letters, numbers. Grandma Chloe taught me." Chloe, overhearing from the kitchen, smiled. Her 8-year-old granddaughter had become the center of her world, especially since Caleb had passed away 3 years earlier. "Of course you do," Madeline said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "You're the smartest girl I know." Life moved on, full of responsibilities and quiet joys. Madeline had become a respected surgeon, admired by her colleagues and trusted by her patients. For once, everything seemed to be falling into place. Even the memory of Caleb no longer hurt the way it used to, though traces of him lingered in every corner of the house. In the final months of his life, something between them had started to unravel. Caleb, once steady and attentive, had begun to grow distant. At first, Madeline chalked it up to exhaustion. But then she noticed the signs: lingering sense of alcohol, late nights, that vacant look in his eyes. The truth came out by accident. A colleague at the hospital let something slip. "Hey, did you know Caleb's been seeing his ex? She moved back after the divorce." Madeline didn't react. But that night, she paid closer attention. The way he flinched when the phone rang. The way he avoided her eyes. The way he stared off into nothing, lost in thought. Chloe had noticed too. She tried to talk sense into her son. "Caleb, what are you doing? You have a wife, a daughter. Wake up." "I'm not doing anything wrong, Mom," he insisted. "We're just talking. She's going through a lot. She needs someone." But he came home later and later, his mood growing darker by the day. Madeline said nothing, burying herself in work and caring for Sienna, clinging to the hope that this strange phase would pass. It didn't. The breaking point came on their wedding anniversary. Madeline had prepared dinner, sent Sienna to the movies with Chloe, lit candles, made his favorite dish. Caleb arrived 2 hours late, guilt written all over him, and the scent of someone else's perfume trailing behind him. "We need to talk," Madeline said calmly as he sat down. "I know," he sighed. "I've been meaning to." "Madeline. I'm confused." His confession was clumsy, tangled. How he had run into his first love by chance. How she cried on his shoulder about her broken life. How old feelings had come rushing back. "I don't want to hurt you, or Sienna," he said, eyes lowered. "But I can't lie anymore. I need time to figure things out." "You'll have to choose," Madeline replied, her voice steady but tight. "I can't keep living like this." Something snapped in her. All those weeks of anxiety, restless nights, waiting and wondering, it all boiled over. And what are we supposed to do? Just wait around? Should Sienna sit there wondering if her dad loves her? Maybe it'd be better if she didn't have a father at all than one like this. The words hung heavy in the room. Caleb turned pale. He stood up and walked out. Madeline sat alone in the dark for a long time, staring at the melted candles. She knew she'd lashed out, said things the wrong way. But the pain, and the exhaustion, had finally overflowed. In the morning, she was woken by a phone call. The police. Short, blunt phrases. An accident. Lost control of the vehicle. Died on the spot. The toxicology report showed alcohol in his system. How she got through the following days, the funeral, the condolences, the aching emptiness in the house, Madeline remembered only in fragments. It felt like she was moving through a thick fog, where sounds were muffled and faces blurred. The only thing that kept her grounded was Sienna. The little girl, who had lost the father she adored, needed her mother more than ever. And then there was Chloe, who had lost her only son, and yet somehow still found the strength to support both her daughter-in-law and granddaughter. Life can be cruel, Chloe said a few days after the funeral, as they sat together in the kitchen late at night. But we have to keep going. You and I, we're family now. Madeline nodded, unable to speak. The guilt inside her felt endless. Her final words to Caleb had been harsh. She hadn't had the chance to make things right, to explain, to say she was sorry. Don't blame yourself, Chloe said softly, as if reading her thoughts. I know what you're thinking. But you didn't put him behind that wheel. But I was the one who drove him out that night, Madeline whispered, her voice breaking. He was a grown man, Chloe replied gently. He made his own choices. And, she hesitated, unsure if she should go on, the way he was heading, it was bound to end like this eventually. I knew my son. When he fell hard. Later, Madeline learned that Caleb had spent that night at his lover's. He'd been drinking, then decided to drive home. A year passed after Caleb's death. Madeline threw herself into work, trying to silence the grief. In the operating room, standing over a surgical table, she found a kind of peace, a space where nothing existed except skill, knowledge, instinct. Personal pain had no room there. She became an even more attentive and intuitive doctor. Her colleagues noticed. It's like she senses what the patient needs, they said. She sees the diagnosis before the scans. Madeline would only smile faintly, remembering her grandmother's words about the family gift, that it often awakened after deep emotional upheaval. She turned down every attempt at being set up. Men aren't the most important thing in life, she'd joke, though deep down she knew the truth, she was afraid. Afraid to trust again, to lose again, to be let down. But fate had other plans. A year after Caleb's death, a new paramedic joined the hospital where Madeline worked. Jackson. He wasn't just a driver, he was a trained medic, with years of field experience. Tall, lean, with an easy smile and warm brown eyes that noticed everything. At first, they were just colleagues. He'd often be part of the emergency crew that called her out to surgeries. Then came casual encounters in the cafeteria, discussions of tough cases, exchanges of medical journals. Jackson was a widower. He had lost his wife during childbirth a few years earlier. Maybe it was that shared note of loss that brought him and Madeline closer. He started showing signs of interest, gently, respectfully, never crossing boundaries. It began with a cup of coffee after shifts, then a few walks during lunch breaks, and eventually, offers to drive her home after long days. Madeline hadn't even realized when she started looking forward to those little moments, choosing outfits with more care, wearing perfume she hadn't touched since Caleb's death. Her co-workers noticed the change but said nothing out of respect. Only the head nurse, who had known Madeline since her first day at the hospital, once said quietly, "You're starting to glow. And that's a good thing. Life goes on." Still, Madeline hesitated to bring Jackson home, to introduce him to Chloe and Sienna. But when she finally did, the outcome was not what she expected. Sienna, usually warm and curious around guests, kept her distance. And after Jackson left, she said calmly, "He's not the one you need, Mommy." Madeline was surprised, but chalked it up to jealousy, her daughter adjusting to the idea of a new man in her mother's life. Chloe, too, seemed uneasy after the visit, and later spoke up gently. "Take your time. Really look at him. There's something about him I can't quite explain, something that doesn't feel real." But Madeline brushed off the warnings. Jackson was kind, thoughtful, and for the first time in years, she felt like more than just a mother and a doctor, she felt like a woman again. Their relationship deepened over the following months, and she began to consider taking the next step. Then, one evening before a late shift, Madeline stopped into a small cafe on the other side of town for a quick coffee. And there he was, Jackson, sitting at a corner table with a young, attractive woman. Not a stranger. They were holding hands. Everything about them spoke of intimacy, of connection far beyond friendship. Madeline froze in the doorway. The pain that washed over her wasn't as sharp as what she'd felt with Caleb. It was heavier. Resigned. Again, she thought. But instead of making a scene, she turned and quietly walked out. That night, she sent a short message, "I don't need explanations. Just leave my life." Jackson called. He texted. He waited outside the hospital. But Madeline stood firm. Not because she had loved him so deeply, but because she refused to bring another liar into her life. Or her daughters. "Maybe you should have asked," Chloe said cautiously. "Maybe you didn't see the whole picture." "I saw enough," Madeline replied with calm certainty. "It's not about him having someone else. It's about the lie. And I won't live with that." Chloe didn't argue. A few days later, they learned Jackson had quit the hospital and left town. That evening, Madeline sat by the open window, wrapped in a quiet stillness, thinking about the path her life had taken. Maybe she really was meant to be alone. Maybe simple, ordinary happiness, the kind where you love and are loved in return, just wasn't in the cards for her. First, the violence that shattered her youth. Then Caleb's death. And now, this. But strangely, she didn't feel despair. Somewhere deep inside, something told her, it wasn't over. There was still more ahead. She just had to keep believing. She had Sienna. She had work she loved. She had Chloe. Her parents, flawed, but hers. And Scarlett, her loyal sister. Life, she thought, is like a mountain river, twisting unpredictably through rock and gorge, sometimes slowing in calm eddies, sometimes crashing into whitewater. For Madeline, the past 10 years had been just that, a wild current of loss and discovery, of daily routines and sudden depths of joy. Now, at 29, she looked in the mirror at a young woman with serious eyes and the faintest traces of smile lines at the corners of her mouth, etched by joy, sorrow, laughter, and sleepless nights. Life had taught her many things, but above all, it had taught her to accept fate without bitterness. To hold on to the warm, living part of herself that still reached out to the world. The day promised to be ordinary. Madeline started her morning shift, checked in on her post-op patients, reviewed the surgery schedule. Madeline, emergency case. A young nurse burst into the staff room. Ambulance is bringing in a patient with a stab wound. Madeline headed to the ER at a brisk pace, buttoning her coat on the way. After years of practice, she had seen it all, from minor household injuries to gang violence. Stabbings weren't common in their town, but not unheard of either. "What's the case?" she asked the prep team, scrubbing her hands. "Bar fight. Knife to the liver, critical condition, major blood loss," the anesthesiologist reported. "Male, about 45, no known pre-existing conditions." Madeline nodded, pulling on gloves. "Get the oar ready. I'll examine him now." She pulled back the curtain separating the trauma bay, and froze. The floor seemed to vanish beneath her feet. A wave of déjà vu slammed into her, cold and violent. Lying there on the gurney, pale and sweating, was a face she had once sworn to erase from her memory, but had never truly forgotten. Mason Prescott. Time had changed him. His face was heavier, with deep shadows under his eyes. Streaks of gray ran through his dark hair. But it was him. The man who, 10 years ago, had broken her, and in doing so, unknowingly set her life on a new course. Madeline recoiled, as if struck. A buzzing filled her ears. Black spots danced before her eyes. For a moment, she thought she might faint. "Doctor, are you all right?" the nurse asked, alarmed by her expression. "I'm fine. It's just a moment of weakness." "I'll be okay," Madeline said, forcing herself to breathe. To focus. To stay upright. She forced herself to step closer. Leaning over the patient, she began assessing his condition. Just then, the man's eyelids fluttered, and he opened his eyes. His gaze, hazy from pain and blood loss, wandered aimlessly, until it landed on her face. "No. It can't be," he mouthed, barely audible, before slipping back into unconsciousness. A wave of heat rushed over Madeline, then cold. He had recognized her. After 10 years, in this condition, but he still knew who she was. Something dark and suffocating rose inside her, a flood of rage, fear, and revulsion. For a split second, her hands felt paralyzed, like they wouldn't obey her. Like she physically couldn't touch this man, even through latex gloves. "Let him die," whispered a voice in the back of her mind. "Let him get what he deserves." But then another voice surfaced, her grandmother's. Her words echoed in Madeline's memory, "When you see him again, remember, revenge poisons the soul of the one who takes it more than the one who deserves it. The power will be in your hands, but what matters is how you use it. Your choice will shape your fate." And so Madeline made her choice. Drawing a deep breath, she spoke firmly, her tone steady and professional. "Prep immediately." "Blood type?" "Oh, positive," the nurse answered. "Blood products ready?" "Yes, doctor." "Then let's not waste time." The operation lasted 3 hours. Madeline worked like a machine, precise, focused, methodical, her emotions shut down completely. The wound was severe, the blade had nicked the edge of the liver, causing massive internal bleeding. Any hesitation, any misstep, and the patient would have died before dawn. But her hands didn't falter. She did everything required of her as a doctor. She saved the life of the man who had once destroyed hers. When the last suture was in place and Mason was transferred to intensive care, Madeline changed out of her scrubs, and was suddenly hit by a wave of dizziness. A vivid image crashed into her mind, so real it felt like a memory. Sienna, on a school bus. The screech of brakes. Screaming children. Blood on shattered glass. Her heart nearly exploded out of her chest. She grabbed her phone and dialed home. Chloe answered. "Chloe," Madeline gasped, her voice tight with panic. "Don't let Sienna go on the field trip today." "What?" Chloe replied, startled. "Madeline, you gave permission yourself." "Don't let her go," Madeline insisted. "Make something up, anything. Tell her I asked. Say I had a bad dream. Say I've got a bad feeling. Whatever you have to say." There was a brief pause on the other end. "All right," Chloe said finally. "I don't know what's going on, but I'll keep her home. I'll say she has a doctor's appointment." Madeline sank into a chair, her legs weak with relief. She didn't understand where the image had come from, that vision, that sudden flash of dread, but every instinct she had, both as a doctor and as a mother, told her it had been right. This wasn't panic. It had been a real threat. Later that evening, the mother of one of Sienna's classmates called. "Madeline, have you heard? The school bus was in an accident." They were on their way to the museum. There was a truck at the intersection, ran the light, the woman's voice trembled. My daughter's in the ICU. Concussion and a broken collarbone. But Sienna wasn't with them, right? Why didn't she go? Madeline slowly sank back into her chair, her ears ringing. So it had been real. The vision was true. The gift her grandmother had spoken of had awakened, triggered by overwhelming emotion, by the shock of facing her past in such an unexpected, brutal way. That night, walking home, Madeline felt a strange calm settle over her. As if a circle had finally closed, and a new chapter was beginning. She had saved 2 lives, her tormentors, by fulfilling her duty as a doctor, and her daughters, by trusting her instincts. It was as if fate had been testing her, weighing her humanity, her courage, her wisdom. At home, she hugged Sienna so tightly the little girl squirmed. Mom, you're gonna squish me. Madeline just laughed, tears in her eyes. Sorry, sweetheart. I'm just so happy you're here. With me. The next day, as Madeline was doing post-op rounds, the head nurse approached her. Madeline, there's someone asking to see you. Says it's personal. He introduced himself as the brother of the stab victim from yesterday. Should I send him away? Her first instinct was to say no. But something told her this was a conversation that needed to happen. All right, she nodded. Have him wait in the staff room. I'll be free in 15. The man waiting for her bore little resemblance to Mason, just a faint similarity in the jawline. He was shorter, with piercing blue eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. His clothes were modest but tasteful. Early 40s, she guessed. Asher Prescott, he said, standing as she entered. Mason's brother. I came to thank you. For saving him. That evening at dinner, she told Chloe about the meeting. Chloe stirred her tea in silence, then offered quietly. You can't judge a person by their family. Even gold shines in the dirt. When Mason was well enough to sit up, he asked to speak with Madeline privately. She hesitated for a long time, why reopen old wounds? But eventually, she agreed. She had the right to hear whatever he needed to say. He was lying in bed, older, dim-eyed, stripped of the arrogance and cruelty she remembered from 10 years ago. Nothing remained of the predator who had once shattered her life. I know my words can't undo anything, he said, eyes fixed on the floor. But I want you to know, I hate myself for that night. Madeline listened in silence, her expression unreadable. But inside, there was calm, not cold indifference, but real peace. She had risen above her past, moved beyond it, and now this man no longer had power over her. I don't need your remorse, she said steadily. But if it helps you become a better man, then let it. I don't forgive you, but I don't wish you harm either. With that, she turned to leave. As she reached the doorway, Asher was there waiting. Are you all right? He asked, noticing how pale she looked. I'm fine, Madeline nodded. Just a heavy conversation. Would you like to take a walk? He offered. The hospital gardens are beautiful this time of year. They strolled through the tree-lined paths in silence, breathing in the sweet scent of blooming linden trees. After a while, Asher finally spoke. You know, he said, I always sensed Mason carried something dark inside him. Now I know what it was. There was no defense in his voice, only sorrow. Regret. Mason and I were never alike, he continued. He was ambitious, charismatic. I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the delicate one, as our father called me. But I always knew, there was something cracked in him. And in me, maybe there's something steadier. Less obvious, but there. Madeline glanced at him from the corner of her eye, slight, wary, with silver at his temples and nervous hands that kept adjusting his glasses. He was nothing like his brother. Not just in appearance, but in essence. There was something in him, honesty, a quiet integrity, that couldn't be taught. You were either born with it, or you weren't. I believe you, she said, surprising herself with how easily the words came. That evening, on her way home, Madeline caught herself thinking about Asher. Thinking that she wanted to see him again. To hear his soft, slightly husky voice. To notice the way those little lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes when he smiled. And then she stopped herself. She couldn't go there. Not yet. The scars of the past, her fear of trusting again, her constant focus on Sienna, none of it would let her lean into those feelings. I can't afford another mistake, she told herself. Not now. Not while Sienna is still so vulnerable. When she got home, a surprise was waiting for her. Sienna sat at the table, hunched over a piece of paper, carefully moving a colored pencil back and forth. Madeline peeked over her daughter's shoulder and froze. It was a drawing, a portrait of a man with piercing blue eyes. It was rough and childlike, but unmistakably resembled Asher. "What's this?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "That's the man who came to see you at the hospital," Sienna answered matter-of-factly. "I saw him in a dream. He won't hurt us, Mommy." Madeline sank into a chair, her knees trembling. Through the open window, the warm June breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of blooming trees and the quiet promise of change, change already standing on the threshold of her life, waiting only for her to open the door. Seasons had come and gone, marking time with spring rains, summer heat, autumn fog, and winter storms. A full year had passed since that fateful encounter, one that split Madeline's life into before and after. A year that had turned her understanding of the world upside down, showing her just how strangely fate weaves its patterns, connecting lives that once seemed impossibly distant. Mason Prescott, after being discharged from the hospital, sold his construction business and left town. Madeline no longer felt hatred toward him, not even anger. Only a quiet sense of relief, knowing that chapter of her life was finally, truly closed. But Asher stayed. At first, his visits were infrequent and careful, as if he feared disrupting the fragile trust that had formed between them. Then he started coming more often, bringing a book he wanted to discuss, a box of specialty tea blends for Chloe, a puzzle game for Sienna. Chloe grew fond of him too. One evening, as she and Madeline sat alone in the kitchen, Chloe said something she had clearly been holding in for a while. "There's something in him, something solid, like there was in my late husband. Men like that, they don't betray you, Madeline." Madeline had tried to resist the feelings that had begun to take root. Why complicate things? She already had her daughter. Her job. Chloe's constant support. Wasn't that enough to be happy? But the heart doesn't ask for permission. With every visit, it became clearer, Asher had become a part of her life. A part she didn't want to imagine losing. They decided on a simple wedding, just close friends and family. Among the guests were Madeline's parents. The celebration was held at home. Chloe insisted there was no need to waste money on a restaurant. "It's more special this way," she said. The tables were set out in the garden beneath an old apple tree. The day was warm and still, as if nature itself had blessed their union. Scarlett was there too, now a confident young woman who had recently graduated from journalism school. Laughing, she told stories about her job at the paper, about her field assignments, and the quirky, fascinating people she met along the way. Madeline noticed her sister deep in conversation with one of Asher's colleagues, a young instructor from the local trade school. "Looks like there might be another wedding soon," she whispered to her husband, nodding toward the pair. Asher smiled. "Liam's a good guy. Smart, genuine. They'd make a great match." A special space was set aside to honor her grandmother. In the corner of the garden stood a small table with a photo in a wooden frame, surrounded by wildflowers. Candles flickered beside bundles of herbs tied with twine, made from Olivia's old recipes. "You were right," Madeline thought, looking at the smiling, wrinkled face in the photo. "It all came together, just like you said it would." One of the most special moments for the entire family was their trip to Madeline's hometown. They went in August. North Hollow had barely changed over the years. Madeline showed her husband and daughter the places of her childhood, the school where her parents once taught, the fields where she and her friends picked wild daisies, the river where she had learned to swim. Then they visited the cemetery, to her grandmother's grave. A small mound of earth covered in grass, a simple wooden cross with a nameplate, the humble resting place of a woman whose wisdom had guided generations of their family. She was extraordinary, Madeline said softly, gently clearing the weeds around the grave. She lived through war, lost her husband, survived hunger and poverty. But she never lost her faith, in life, in people, in the idea that everything has meaning, even if we don't see it right away. Asher listened quietly, respectfully. Sienna helped her mother, carrying water from the well, carefully watering the flowers they'd planted. Wise beyond her years, she seemed to understand the depth of that moment, the sacred connection between the living and those who had come before. "Thank you, Grandma," Madeline whispered silently. "For everything you gave me. For your strength, your wisdom, your faith. But most of all, for teaching me that there is always room for miracles in this world. And life itself is the greatest miracle of all, unpredictable, sometimes cruel, but always reaching for balance and light." Dear listeners, Madeline's story has come to an end, and I hope her journey touched something in your heart. Her path was filled with trials, from the horror of assault and rejection by her own family, to the grief of losing the man she loved, and a final, unexpected encounter with the one who had once shattered her youth. At every turn, she faced difficult choices. But what would you have done? Would you have had the strength to raise a child conceived through violence? Would you have been able to save the life of the man who once destroyed yours? Could you learn to trust again after betrayal and loss? Share your thoughts in the comments, about Madeline's choices and the people who shaped her story. If this tale stirred something in your soul, please give it a like and share it with your friends. It may help someone find strength in their own dark moment. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more stories, tales of strong women, love, and generational wisdom. You'll find all our stories here, each one unique, each carrying its own message.